All right, we are live. Have a good meeting.
All right, thank you, everyone. This is Monday, April 19th, and it is 3:01 p.m., and this is the weekly Lincoln County Board of Commissioners meeting. First item on our agenda would call the meeting to order, which I have done. We have all three commissioners present, which does constitute a quorum. And next item would be the adoption of our consent calendar. These are items of a routine nature or items that have come before the Board of Commissioners previously. If staff or commissioners wish to highlight an item, they may do so now. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion for approval.
I will make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. Next item on our agenda are a couple of decision items. The first one involves technically a legal requirement that the county have a public health administrator, and guess what? We have somebody that I believe is highly qualified for that legal responsibility. Council Belmont, let you provide additional information.
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thanks, Chair Hunt. Yes, this is something that's required by Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 431, to have a county public health administrator. Florence is taking the job on an interim basis, but we need to make the appointment for purposes of OHA to coordinate our activities with the state agencies. And especially at this time, it's extremely important that we have that continuity with the retirement of former director Rebecca Austin. So this actually accomplishes that. We're making this back to the effective date when Rebecca retired, which was April 2nd. Florence has agreed to serve in this capacity on behalf of the county. So unless there's any other questions for Florence or myself, I think we can get a motion on this.
Any questions, comments, commissioners?
Now, Mr. Chair, I would happily make a motion to approve the appointment of Florence Portal as Lincoln County Public Health Administrator under ORS Chapter 431.
And I will second that motion.
You know, I hesitate to do this, but Florence, any comments?
Yeah, I'm very honored, and thank you for the appointment.
Well, thank you for all the hard work you've done, and I know you'll continue to do. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Congratulations, Florence. Next item is a resolution. This is certainly a area of conversation that is very relevant. And Commissioner Hall, I believe you will handle this item.
Sure, I'd be glad to read the ordinance the resolution. Also give a little bit of background, but I'd like to request the assistance of County Counsel Wayne Belmont as well. This is one in really a series of, I think, intention or value statements our board has made over the last year and a half or so. In September 2019, we adopted a resolution. Oh, actually, this is the original resolution that I was referencing, valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion in Lincoln County. Do we have the resolution that we're adopting today regarding hate speech and hate groups?
Good catch, Commissioner.
Yeah, I was saying, as I was referencing that, then I realized that was the agenda we have in the packet. I'm hoping the new proposed agenda is part of the packet. Yeah, it would be, 21. Let's see. Yeah, there we go.
There it is. Yep.
So we saw the earlier motion from September of 2019, valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Board of Commissioners, in conjunction with the entire management team of the county, last June adopted a very strong anti-racism statement. And this resolution is in part an outgrowth of continuing growth of hate groups, hate speech, and violence motivated by hate. Most recently, we've seen a rash of incidents directed at people of Asian descent, unfortunately, but well, let me go ahead and read the proposed resolution. In the matter of a resolution denouncing hate groups, hate speech, and violence motivated by hate. Whereas the Board of Commissioners recognizes and acknowledges that the state of Oregon and the United States has a shared history of disparate treatment of BIPOC people within our state and nation that includes, but is not limited to, Oregon is the only state admitted to the Union with a clause in its original constitution prohibiting free blacks from living in the state, and indigenous peoples who called Oregon home prior to the arrival of European settlement, as well as other indigenous people across our country, have been systematically deprived of their culture, their property, and their legal rights. And Oregon had the largest Ku Klux Klan membership of any state in the western United States during the Klan revival of the 1920s, fueled primarily by anti-Catholic and anti-Asian settlement. And whereas a report in the fall of 2020, based on data from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, identified Oregon as one of the top 5 states for violent militia activity. And whereas numerous individual instances have recently been documented in this country of verbal and physical assaults on people based on their national origin, skin color, religion, sexual orientation, and gender identity, and such incidents appear to be on the rise. And whereas such words and actions run counter to the ideal of pluralism and respect that are the foundation of our society, and whereas this board adopted a resolution valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion in Lincoln County on September 11th, 2019, and this resolution is built on the foundation of that earlier document. Now, therefore, we, the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners, denounce all individuals and organizations that engage in hate speech, and we further denounce those individuals and groups who use the speech to incite violence, whether directly or indirectly. And is there a page 2?
Oh, there
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah, the rights of free speech and peaceful assembly guaranteed in the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States are among those most cherished by the public. However, these rights must never be used in a way that brings harm to others. We urge all Lincoln County residents to join us in reaffirming our belief that all members of our communities deserve freedom from violence and verbal abuse in any form. And Mr. Belmont, people might be watching this, hearing these words, reading these words, and saying, well, good words and important words, but what are we as Lincoln County government doing to put these values and ideas into action? And could I put you on the spot and ask you to address that?
Sure, Commissioners. Wayne Belmont, County Council. And maybe I'll just hark back to the September 11th, 2019 resolution that we adopted to say, here's what we actually did say at that time. We affirm as matters of principle the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion in every aspect of county governance, operations, and services rendered to county residents and the public at large. And we committed to establish by example and leadership the county's commitment to those principles. So some of the things that we have done very recently, we've started to include in our own grant programs a reference to and a copy of the 2019 statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and asking for an affirmation from those who apply for our grant program. We're doing that with the currently underway, the county's nonprofit social service agency grant program. We've also undertaken and examining a lot of training for county employees and are looking at partnering with some other groups around the state to do training to actually enhance our understanding and affirmation again of these particular values. And thirdly, we're also looking at this in the context of how we apply our own internal policies and external practices around hiring in the county, looking at incorporating DEI principles into our employment process. So that's just 3 examples. We've got a lot of work yet to do and a lot more activity I think will be undertaken by the county, its departments, and its offices.
Commissioner Hall, you're still muted. There you go.
Esky today. I just want to say excellent. I think it shows that we are backing up these words with actions. We'll continue to do so. Along these same lines, the board sent a letter recently to the legislature supporting a bill declaring that racism to be a public health emergency in the state of Oregon, but we also have a local resolution making that same declaration in the pipeline as well. So, you know, just one more step along what will be a continuing journey for the county, and hopefully we can continue to be even better partners with community groups working toward these same goals.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you. I guess just a couple of comments, not so much on the resolution that's before us. I can completely get on board with that, but I guess back to the kind of larger diversity, equity, and inclusion framework in which this fits in. One is, I think that statement, the DEI statement that we pulled up earlier, I would really like to have some staff work on kind of pulling that out of a resolution format and into an actual statement. I think in terms of us having that on our website, I recently applied for a grant that required a DEI statement, and that, you know, checks the box, so to speak. But in terms of the statement, all the whereas language that we use in resolutions doesn't really work, I guess, for just a statement. And I guess the same with this one goes through as well. That works for creating a resolution, but I would like to have staff pull it out into more of a statement without that whereas language, and it just kind of cleans it up a little bit. I guess the other thing I would say, Council Belmont mentioned this, is I would like to incorporate these things into our, and yeah, I see the non-discrimination statement, but that's actually, I think, different than the one that you pulled up from the resolution earlier. Anyways, I think pulling both of these into our 2 grant applications that we do, so that organizations that receive money from us, you know, have to have similar statements for their organizations, I think would be good. And then again, in that larger DEI framework, I would really like to go and look at road names we have in the county. I think there's one in particular that we need to start the process of looking at changing, and there might be others as well. But I do support their resolution.
Okay, very good. And certainly I support the resolution, and I think a couple of topics have already been hit on that are important to me. When I was raising my kids, we get into some conversations, and I more than once said, well, you know, talk is cheap. What are you going to do? And I think, the county has taken some actions. Certainly these resolutions are a very important first step. And as Council Belmont has already highlighted, we have taken some action to really reflect a commitment to these statements and the values that they represent. So certainly the first steps in a long process, as I believe Commissioner Hall alluded to, but certainly important steps that I certainly believe we need to take, and believe is in the best interests of those that we serve and even the broader region and communities. So with that, if there are no more comments, I would enthusiastically support a motion for approval.
I would so move.
And I will happily second.
All right, with that, all those in favor of approving resolution 2119-4A denouncing hate groups, hate speech, and violence motivated by hate, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
I believe I heard all three commissioners, I think the two with ayes at the same time, so that resolution is approved unanimously. Thank you, Commissioner Hall, for your extra effort in this area. All right, we'll move on to reports. Florence, dazzle us with the information, particularly in your new role as our legal county health administrator, public health administrator.
Good afternoon. Okay, I don't know if I'm gonna be dazzling you all in good news, though. We'll see. All right, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So as you can see, the slide speaks for itself. So we are April 19th, 11 days to go for the 100 cases. Steady increase since February. Go to the next slide, please.
So Florence, if I may interrupt, that is a actual count, 100 through the month of April, but the risk level is based on the last 2 weeks, or said differently, if we're a population of 50, that puts us at 200. Well, let's look at the next slide. I'm sorry.
Yes. Let's go to the next slide. So
there we go.
There you have it. Yes. So we are maintaining, and actually we're steadily increasing also in our case rate per 100,000. We're still about 41 from extreme risk. As you know, extreme risk would only happen. So let's say we were to continue on and our case rate would keep on going upwards, we would move to extreme risk only if, you can go to the next slide, only if we would see a hospitalization numbers throughout the state of Oregon, 300 people hospitalized for COVID-related reasons or more. And I believe there is a second criteria that for some reason has left my brain right now. In terms of hospitalizations at the state level, do you mind scrolling down, please? Okay, thank you. So, so we've seen a weekly increase of cases statewide. And as you can see, I believe, I'm trying to get the numbers that Susan got me earlier, but pretty much on Friday of last week, there were 200 people hospitalized due to COVID, went up 15 on Saturday, and now we are at 243 today as of this morning. So the hospitalization are coming up, the cases are increasing. We are also, I mean, this is definitely a trend that we're seeing statewide. Next slide, please. So, Commissioner Hunt, we're definitely remaining in high risk because this week is movement week, I believe, and so we will be in the high risk until May 6th, at least. All right, so I thought this week I would give you some like kind of like statewide updates, because I thought the updates we got from Oregon Health Authority on Friday of last week were really interesting. And it's giving you kind of a picture of what's happening overall. So as you can see, daily cases of COVID have more than doubled in just over a month, increasing from a 7-day moving average of 249 on March 6th to a daily average of 595 cases. Over the past 2 days, which, so the 2 days that are being referred to are either, it was not very clear, are either Wednesday and Thursday of last week or Thursday and Friday of last week, okay? But regardless, last week they saw within 2 days a total of 1,576 new cases statewide, and so this is the highest 2-day total since early February. Can you just scroll down the slide a little bit so I can read it? Oh. Just go back. Thank you. I'm having a hard time seeing the. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. So pretty much this slide is definitely showing you that the increase in cases is happening throughout Oregon. Next slide, please. Everybody's fatigued, right? The public is fatigued, the public health workforce is fatigued, the business community is fatigued, we're all fatigued. And so that leads to maybe not being as mindful about taking the precaution and prevention measures that we have been taking for over a year now. And so that was interesting because the state health officer mentioned a few outbreaks that had happened in the state and recently, and some of those were because people have decided that it would be okay to, hang out indoors and not necessarily be physically distant or wear a mask. And so as you can see, there was a recent outbreak at a multi-night karaoke event, 36 cases, 3 people in the hospital, 1 bed. Indoor concert at a small music venue, 15 cases. And a backyard gathering of 10 people with everybody getting sick. So, and as we discussed, and we will discuss again this week, we discussed last week that we're definitely seeing the Californian variants taking hold in Oregon, and those variants are more transmissible. So it is even more important to continue on observing all those prevention measures and getting a vaccine. Because the sooner folks get a vaccine, the fewer new variants we will see. And we're kind of in that race against the variants, right? Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the table that we discussed last week. And as you can see, our region is definitely quite a lot of the B1429, which is one of the many California variants. Next slide, please. So we will go through this, right? But this virus is smart and it adapts, and so we all are experiencing this. Can we be over with this already, and it's absolutely understandable. We want to go back to what we knew and what was normal, right? But the more we let our guards down, the less likely we will get out of there fast, right? So it's very important. And now, we know what to do. Last year, we were just like kind of discovering as we went, learning about this disease as we went, and learning about what were the best prevention measures. And so now we know what we know what to do, and we have another tool to the toolbox, a very effective tool. We have those vaccines. And so it's really important for people to get that, even if it is not for you, it is for your families, your friends, your neighbors, your community. So and as we showed in one of those previous slides, I'm not, it's great that the weather is getting better and that we're getting outside. And as was discussed in the backyard barbecue outbreak, even when you're outside, you can still transmit the disease. So it is still very important to wear your mask and be socially distant. And get your vaccine, please. And it doesn't really, I understand that people have their preferences. There is not really a recommendation towards which vaccines, right? Pretty much the vaccine that is available to you is the one you should get if you can get it. And now, as you know, today is the day where everybody is eligible, everybody 16 and older is eligible to get a vaccine. All right, so as, you can slide down. Thank you. So as you know, last week, FDA and CDC decided to, pause the administration of the J&J because they wanted to take a deeper look on what was happening. We had 6 cases out of 4.8 million doses administered in the US, and this is not even counting the doses administered globally, right, of this vaccine. So 6 cases reported, severe type of blood clot in women aged 18-48. There were no cases reported in Oregon. I think all of this is made out of a lot of caution, and it's in my opinion, it really shows that the system is working, and that like we discussed last week we had a quality issue control. Now we have a possible adverse reaction. All those systems that are in place are functioning, and the authorities in charge are taking the necessary measures to address those concerns. So once the Oregon Health Authority got the message from CDC that we had to pause the Johnson & Johnson, we, made sure that this information was communicated to all of our partners, and the J&J is in the fridge, and we are waiting to be able to administer it again soon. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. Next slide. I'm just gonna try to go a little bit faster. Okay, so I had a moment last week where I thought, man, I think we're getting second position. Wood River, got how do you say that? Got us a run for, yeah. So anyways, we're still
Run
first.
for our money. I run for our vaccination.
Yes, I run for our vaccinations, but we still have the highest rates of vaccination. So we just hope that people will continue on getting vaccinated, and we'll keep on vaccinating as much as we can. Next slide, please. All right, so we discussed last week that we had a lot of outreach activities in the works. Some of them had to be paused because we were hoping to use the J&J and couldn't, but we decided for one of our activities planned for last week was really taking care of the people who needed the vaccine and couldn't come to us. So we contracted with a home health agency, and the nurses went out and vaccinated 41 people last week, along with North Lincoln Fire and Rescue. So I believe with North Lincoln Fire, it's 46 people vaccinated at home. And so in 4 weeks, we'll do a second round, likely with our public health nurses. Next slide, please. So, because, I think it's very important that we keep on communicating, and I understand that people might be really tired of hearing the same message over and over. So we're really trying to vary it without really varying the content. So we have updated our radio public service announcements, and really to try to focus it on spring and summer activities, and we have many social media posts. We have this public information update that goes out weekly. We have a new campaign that we are coordinating with our neighboring counties and Samaritan Health System around Healthy Tomorrows, and pretty much like explaining why did you get your vaccine and why it's important. Next slide. And we continue on our very strong collaboration with all of our partners. We have we're starting the outreach with the Lincoln County School District also, and they are starting vaccination with some of the extra doses of Pfizer that Samaritan had over the weekend to vaccinate at Newport High School for any 16-year-old and older who wanted the vaccine. So that's exciting, getting the vaccine to the school. And so there is much more that we are planning on doing there. And we have finally this countywide mailer, which I think is getting to people hopefully this week. Next slide, please. And then, as usual, we have our vaccines, arriving 2,300 doses of prime doses coming to Lincoln County this week. Next slide. Along with 1,900 second doses. Next slide. And, we have all sorts of events planned for this week to be able to get the vaccine to people. So if you need to schedule your appointment, please go to the website, the Lincoln County website, and click on the vaccine clinic, and you can schedule yourselves. Hopefully you have plenty of options that you can choose from. Next slide, please. So this is what the page looks like. Next page. Any questions? I just want to say before that, we've had a lot of no-shows lately at the various clinics, we being like the fairgrounds, Taft Fire Station, Samaritan. And so we're really considering the idea of offering some walk-in options to people. So we'll communicate more when when we do have this in place. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Florence. Commissioners, questions or comments? Commissioner Hall.
I think all of my questions were answered in the course of the presentation. I mean, it's kind of, very much a mixed message. I mean, knowing that we're not an outlier and that, well, our numbers are going up, that, I take some hope from the fact that compared to many counties, our increase is not nearly as dramatic, and that, we're not an outlier. Unfortunately, this seems to be happening statewide and really nationwide as well. But very wise words, I think, Florence, that we've just got to recommit ourselves to doing the things that will get this under control once and for all.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, just one question, Florence. Of the outbreaks that you kind of presented to us, were any of those folks vaccinated? Are we seeing kind of positive cases with people that are vaccinated? I know statistically speaking, it is possible. Have we seen that yet in this county?
So I was trying to answer this question for you, Commissioner Jacobson, earlier, and the data system is down today, so we haven't been able to look. I think we've had maybe 2, and we call those breakthrough cases, but no more than that. And if that, maybe it's 1. But I can get you those numbers as soon as the system comes back online.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I might follow up on that question. I read an article in today's New York Times, and basically they were comparing the risk associated with reinfection after a vaccination to traffic deaths. And I think we all know that flying in an airplane is safer than driving in a car, and yet I know I fear flying in an airplane more than I do driving a car. Well, their point was your fear of getting reinfected after vaccination was less than your chances of being involved in an airplane crash, which again, we all fear more than we do getting in a car, which is far more dangerous. So I think that helped me put in perspective the real risk of reinfection after vaccination. So the question I would have for you, Florence, and I don't know that there's an answer, but I'll ask it. What can we do about vaccination hesitancy? I know our county is actually low as far as the percentage of people that haven't been vaccinated. Therefore, our vaccination hesitancy is relatively low. But what are we doing to address that issue, or what can we do?
So this is a great question. So I don't think we have gotten there yet, to your point, because the demand for vaccine has been pretty steady. I think what I would like to do is, direct people to a website that I think is really good for not only the COVID vaccine, but just vaccination in general, to really explain things. And it's called Boost Oregon. And that's a website that has a lot of resources for both healthcare providers on how to vaccine hesitancy and to parents. And this was mostly, focused on vaccination of kiddos. But
We have Casey doing Google. There we go.
really tries to have a it's So this was mostly focused on children and to try to really have that conversation with parents to try to increase the rates of vaccination in Oregon. But I think it's a really, really great resource. It's very, what am I trying to say? Accessible, very accessible. So I would say first resource this, and then, we're trying to understand what the concerns are, and addressing them, with people. This is definitely a communication shift that will take soon.
Good. Well, I think we're ahead of the curve and we want to stay ahead of the curve. So thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right. If not, thank you, Florence, and appreciate your hard work. And again, the message continues to be, folks, we're not out of it. We need to social distance. We need to wear masks. We need to wash our hands. So keep at it. And again, thank you, Florence.
You're very welcome. Have a nice day.
You too. All right. Next on our agenda is Echo Mountain Complex fire update. Commissioner, excuse me, I just promoted you there, Director Kenyon. Director Kenyon or Council Belmont, appreciate your comments.
This is Wayne, Belmont County Council, and thank you. And before I discuss a couple of things in the recovery operations that we're undertaking and continue to undertake in North County, let's talk a little bit more about what happened last weekend. Because for those of us in Lincoln County, we received, if you're on Lincoln Alerts, you received a notification that we had a red flag warning in April. Which shows that while we're continuing to do all the work in the recovery mode, we have to be vigilant for the next fire season. And I'm hoping maybe, I know that Emergency Manager Jenny Damaris is going to be talking, I think, next about some activities, and maybe she can take a couple of minutes to talk about additional work we're doing to prepare for the next fire season and what people can do on their own to get ready for what's looking like it's going to be something, at least for the near future, we're going to be dealing with on an annual basis. So it just was very surprising to me to see this coming up in April, something that we usually see much later in the year. So we have to be vigilant as well for the coming year. So on the recovery mode, I'm going to, again, I know we've been talking a lot about the activities, especially that Commissioner Jacobson has been leading a team getting some additional funding for a variety of programs. And I was very pleased to see that we actually got the contract for one of those efforts in our hands right now. And we're going to be seeing some money flowing into the county that goes out to the victims, as well as covering some of the many costs that we have incurred in undertaking this pretty gargantuan process of doing recovery. And I'll let her talk a little bit about that. And then we do know that we've got another request before the legislature for some other funding related to the fire. And I hope she can provide us with a little bit of an update on where that's at in the legislative process. And then I just want to talk about, there's a variety of continuing efforts around dealing with water, roads, septic systems and wells, housing issues, mental health. And I'm just trying to do a kind of a laundry list of things and activities that we're engaged in, as well as the long-term recovery group appears to be coming together, and we're seeing some volunteers from North County stepping up and ready to do a process anyway that will get people ready for the long-term recovery activities that need to occur in North County. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Roy to give us an update on everything that's happening with the debris program, because I know there's been some significant progress in that particular area. So I'll turn it over to Roy, and then I think we can have Commissioner Jacobson give us an update.
Thank you.
This is Roy Kenyon, Lincoln County Public Works Director. from what I understand, I have not been up to the north end today, but they completed cleaning up the Salmon River Trailer Park, that portion that was north of Highway 18 last week, or basically very early this week, this morning. And their plan was to move them across the highway and catch that bit that's on the south side. As we know, the 15th was supposedly the last day for ROE submittals, but I believe ODOT will still honor one that comes in now, but it's kind of the last call on those. And so if there's any out there that somebody's kind of sitting on, we need to get those in. But anyway, the cleanup is starting to wind down. They're about ready to move on to bigger and better things. And so I guess, like I said, this is the last call for ROEs and to get your property online to get cleaned up. But like I said, the trailer park on the north side of the road is clean. And that's all I have.
All right. Commissioners, questions, comments?
No question. I'll just say it's good news.
For sure.
I don't have any questions, but I'll just add on to it if that is all right.
Please.
So picking up from Council Belmont's presentation, yes, we did get a contract from Business Oregon that we are now, getting our agreement in place to get some dollars coming in. My understanding is our legislative ask, which ended up about $724,000, is sitting at the governor's desk awaiting signature. So that hopefully will happen soon. There's also supposedly some ODF or Oregon Department of Forestry money coming for wildfire affected counties for communications infrastructure for fires or emergencies in the future. My understanding is that is also awaiting a governor's signature, and then we will be able to apply. Because it's not finalized yet, we don't have a whole lot of information on what exactly the parameters are, but I'm looking for ideas. So if someone's watching this and has an idea for communications infrastructure, send me an email. Also, just on a side note, we had our own Casey Miller and a community volunteer go down to Walport this weekend and pick up rhododendrons at a nursery and take them all the way up to Otis. And I think we're actually needing a couple of more volunteers this week to finish off that load. So if there's anyone that maybe lives in South County that has a truck and is going north, or vice versa, reach out and let me know. Like I said, I think we need at least one more truckload, maybe two, to pick up these plants and get them up the other direction. And then I was just going to say that I was up at the Salmon River RV Park. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday of last week. They weren't quite done yet, but almost done, just removing dirt at that point. And really hard to believe that it was just 3 or 4 weeks ago that it was essentially in its post-burn state. And now it's essentially cleaned up. So even though I know it took a while to get ODOT there, once they're there, they do work really fast, I have to say.
I would echo that. It took a while, but certainly no complaints once they got started. So I'll ask Emergency Manager Damaris, what about an update on the red flag situation this past weekend, please?
Sure, be happy to. So yes, as Mr. Belmont said, it is a little unexpected this early in the season for us to have, a wind event, sure, dry conditions, but actually all the way to the event that it was considered a red flag warning is a concern for us here on the Oregon coast, because that means our weather conditions are most likely permanently changing, which means our seasons during the summertime will be much different. We've also seen many other fires, as you've heard on statewide news. Klamath County had another large fire, I believe, yesterday. And so what that also means for us, as we did experience during Echo Mountain Fire, is that we may not be able to rely on all of the resources that we would hope to be able to have at a moment's notice to come to our aid, which means our local fire districts have to be even more resilient and ready to go. So again, it's just the landscape is changing. One of the things I would add, looking towards the future, is we thank you on your behalf for approving a grant request to the state to be able to update our community wildfire protection plan. That's an addendum plan to your natural hazards mitigation plan under the planning department. That comes up for review every 5 years. We know that our after action review process for this and the review, if you will, of the natural hazard mitigation plan, all of that will be taken into consideration. It's not something that changes overnight, but when we get to that at the end of this year, when we start those planning efforts, if we're awarded those funds with our contractor, that will really set the stage for Lincoln County for the next 5 years of our vision to mitigation, response, and recovery to a wildfire type event. And that's where I would see more emphasis, if you will, on actual policy level about what does mitigation mean for us here in Lincoln County when we're used to being in the rain belt of the Oregon coast. So that's something to look forward to on an actual policy or planning level that will be coming up in the next 18 to 24 months. And then if you would like, I could just give you a few quick briefs on what we have planned for the general community members in Lincoln County for this season.
Okay, I'm getting affirmative nods from my fellow
Okay.
commissioners, so please continue.
Okay, and I know your time is short, so I'll try to be quick. So one of the most important things as we experienced an Echo Mountain Fire was the notification. We have done an annual test of our Lincoln Alerts program every year, and we are moving that test up this year to May 7th. Yes, looking at my notes here, May 7th. You have not been advised yet fully, but we have just finished our transfer over to the state Oregon Alert Program. We in Lincoln County have had a recommendation for many, many years that we have a statewide contract for our emergency notification system, which we use Everbridge. So we have now moved over to that platform, and there'll be some really great additions coming for the community members here that we'll be announcing very shortly. I say that because it allows us to have greater capacity to be able to alert people. We have been able to now get access to the VoIP numbers, cell phone numbers, and additional landline numbers that had not been accessible to us in the past for an automatic import into our system. So it means this year we have a greater capacity to notify people that perhaps had not opted in for a profile. So that's a really positive thing. So we'll be testing all of that on May 7th. We have our annual tabletop exercise scheduled with our cooperators coming up on May 20th. That is an annual event. This year, our scenario will be placed outside of the community of Yachats. They had requested, I believe through one of your joint meetings, to have maybe a little bit more involvement with some planning efforts due to fire. So we'll be working with them, U.S. Forest Service and ODF, to create that scenario to sort of challenge them, the community, us, all of our public safety agencies, and utility partners for response if a fire were to happen in the south part of our county. We will also be doing public presentations this year. They will be virtual due to COVID. We normally do a 2-hour presentation, A to Z, everything that you need to know. We've changed that to break it up into 1-hour modules. And this year we'll be developing 6 different modules to sort of meet that need of information, from animals to shelters, access and functional needs, wildfire mitigation, defensible space. We're joining partners with our OSU Extension Office. We have a new regional liaison that is specific to wildfire mitigation prevention. And so they'll be joining us. We're also working with the state, let's see if I get the name right, State Oregon Insurance Commission. They've got a great presentation on insurance. We'll be combining and meeting with them as part of giving that presentation for 2 of those sections. So we're really looking to expand that partnership and the message of wildfire readiness. We will also, with that series, is we will have an open session for each fire district in Lincoln County. So those constituents, community members, businesses that reside within that fire district jurisdiction will be able to talk one-on-one with their fire chief, ODF, and or U.S. Forest Service if they border that area. And that will be specific again to who resides within that geographical area. Some other things that we're doing sort of behind the scenes is we're working with the American Red Cross. We had did this prior to last year's season and sort of every season, but this year we're really looking at it from a different lens, more of capacity. So we are focusing and going to move forward again with TEP, which is Temporary Evacuation Point, especially during this continued COVID times. I appreciate the presentation we just had from Florence from Public Health. It is important for us to continue to maintain that safe distance in all aspects, even during response. So we are working with them to identify the best locations to have temporary evacuation points, which means people come in their vehicle or however they come. They sort of stage there until a non-congregate shelter area can be established for them if it's going to be a long-term event. We're also looking at sheltering options. How do we change? How do we magnify our ability to provide those sheltering services? And then we internally for county operations and with public health are looking at the medical fragile community members and how do we expand our capacity to be able to provide a greater service to those individuals. We are requesting a couple of different grants that will help with that, and hopefully we will be successful in that award. So we'll be able to purchase additional items to be put in our mobile trailer, so we will be much more versatile to being able to set up medical fragile shelter operations when needed very quickly. Let's see. Last, I'll just add the National Weather Service, our great partners. They will be developing for us a annual seasonal weather briefing. Obviously, for the summer season, they generally announce that as part of our Cooperator tabletop exercise, and then we will make that available to the public as part of our community outreach and information. And that's, again, just a good way for them to be able to see in advance, for us as planners to see in advance, where do we expect our summer to go? As many of us are anticipating a drier and warmer summer with drought conditions could be very possible. I'd happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Jacobson.
I just have one question and then some comments. One is, as for Lincoln Alerts and kind of broader services there, is Lincoln Alerts now we're going to be in Spanish?
So part of the benefit of having Lincoln Alerts with the statewide system is they have also migrated to a newer software version with Everbridge. So there are some greater capacities to be able to have other language messages automated through the system. We don't quite have all the details worked out as of yet. We're all 36 counties are still learning how these new features work. That is one of the new capabilities that will be built into the system.
Yeah, that's great. And I would just add beyond Spanish, another language which is complex because it is mostly not a written language but only spoken, is MAM, which we have many MAM speakers in this community. So I'm not sure if something non-written, like a video, could go through Lincoln Alerts or not, or in this new system, but I guess it's something I would like to be explored. And then I guess the other thing I would say as far as our upcoming tabletop exercise is, I think there's a couple of partners that either, I don't know if they're not invited or don't typically participate, but just in my experience being on the ground last year with the fire, I think we need to invite our media partners not to come and cover the story of the tabletop exercise, but actually to come and participate, because I think they became very critical partners in that public information. I know we had multiple barriers in place with our, Echo Mountain Fire in terms of communicating, and Casey was texting them and getting them on, Facebook. And I think actually having some of them there and working through that would be helpful. The other critical partner I would say that doesn't typically participate is Evergreen Hospice. When you kind of talked about vulnerable populations, that cued me. That was a big issue last year. And I know typically Samaritan and their emergency manager maybe participates in the tabletop, but I think getting hospice to actually be there would be really critical as well.
Thank you.
Right. I guess I would just add from a general standpoint, communication is a fine art, and no matter how much time and energy we devote to communication, it's always a challenge to find new and more effective ways to communicate. So I appreciate those efforts, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Hall, I see you turned on your microphone.
Oh, finish your thought, please, Mr. Chair, if you haven't.
I think I have. Again, the more we can do to communicate, the more both technically and frequency is, I think, a good objective. So that's all I have.
Yeah. And last year showed us multiple challenges. You know, the general manager of one group of local radio stations told me they had power at their studio site, they had power at their transmitter site. But unfortunately, what's referred to in broadcasting as the STL, or studio transmitter link, that was dependent on broadband, and their broadband signal linking the two was down, and that's why they weren't able to be on the air that first critical morning. You know, all of this seems very positive. Just one question for Director Damaris. With this migration to a new platform, will people have to sign up again, or will their registration just automatically transfer over?
That's a very great question. And no change to the user subscriber. However, because we do an annual audit of our Lincoln Alerts program and those opt-in profiles, we find people that have only a PO box and not a street address, which means they receive a notification when we draw our polygon. So you can't really see it here, but this will be coming out shortly. This is your Lincoln Alerts wellness check. So we will be putting out a notification on how you can do a wellness check of your opt-in profile and all the tricks of the trade and things to look out for that we want you to keep an eye on or double check your profile. That will be coming out as part of our notification with our annual test. And then we'll send it out periodically throughout the year, just like a health checkup. Hey, here's a time to take a few minutes to do your Lincoln Alerts wellness check.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Anything more on the Echo Mountain fire before we keep Manager Damaris around for the next item on our agenda, which is the Emergency Management Auxiliary Communications. We're still on communications, but let's hear the annual report. And I believe you have yeah, Darren, there you are. You turned on your camera. Good to see you virtually, my friend, from a few years ago.
Thank you, Commissioners. I am very excited as your County Emergency Manager to present. I believe this is our third annual report for auxiliary communications. As we do for the CERT chapters, we felt that this was a positive way for us to reflect on what this volunteer group does for Lincoln County on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, the Emergency Management Division. And also it's a formalized way for them to establish goals for their volunteer group, establish their leadership team, and then to be able to evaluate or self-assess. One of the things I would like to talk about before I hand it over to Darren is that this year, as we know, was really an unprecedented event. We see our amateur radio operators as communications, holding a two-way mobile unit. That's pretty much all they can do for us. And that's not really the case. Our amateur radio operators are generally dual or triple volunteers in other organizations such as CERT or Animal Shelter, or even now our new Medical Reserve Corps group. And this year, without a doubt, they turned into the jack of all trades. One example I'm going to give you, and then I'll let Darren talk for a bit, and then I'll finish up with just kind of the hours that they donated. Our amateur radio operator, Michelle Pelkey, who is recently retired from NOAA, she's also stepped up and taken on the role of our new Medical Reserve Corps group. When the Echo Mountain fire started and we needed to establish the medical fragile sheltering operations coinciding with the American Red Cross, we had the trailer, we had supplies because we had these things ready to go, but we didn't have a lot of manpower right then and there. EOC was very busy making things happen for public safety. And Michelle Pelkey used her amateur radio that she has, even though telephones were working. She used her amateur radio and put a call out to her fellow ACS members and said, "This is Michelle Pelkey, da 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 da. We need to set up the medical fragile unit. I need people to come down to the Newport Rec Center, help us unload the trailer and get that set up." Within 12 minutes, she had auxiliary communication service members respond to her and show up at the Newport Rec Center and actually help her unload the trailer and get the medical fragile unit set up and ready to go. And then the same happened about 4 days later when it was time to demobilize that medical fragile shelter area. So to me, this was the extreme example of how amateur radio can work in a day-to-day setting for the right people who are listening for the right reasons. And she was able to reach her other volunteer members to be able to help her meet that mission. And then it didn't tax us and the EOC to try and find other people. We have tracked all of the ACS hours for all of the different types of job duties that they did over this past year. And then I'll talk about this. But now I'd like Darren to just have a few minutes to talk about what his team did accomplish this year.
Well, first, thank you very much for giving us a little bit of time to do this. And Jenny makes it so tough to follow because she's so good with all this stuff, as you already know. She steals a little bit of my thunder, but I would like to just take a minute or so to explain how things kind of changed for us this year. Obviously, 2020 was one heck of a challenge, and it's kind of bleeding over into 2021 as well. But it gave us some very interesting opportunities as communicators. We kind of drug our feet to start with, thinking that this flattening the curve was going to happen a little faster than it did. As we noticed, it was not going to, we weren't going to be able to correct the virus issues quick enough to get back into real in-person meetings. We took on some of the online technologies and started using those to get our members together and communicating more. So we've had an increase in participation, certainly this year and the latter half of last year. And this seems to be because of the convenience of the online system. We use Zoom for our platform, but it allows our membership who have had to come to a meeting location, maybe out of town, once a month or twice a month, to now be at home and still participate actively in that as much as we can. So we have increased participation. We've added multiple training events where we have workshops where we work on assembling parts and pieces that we regularly use in our communications. So all that's been a benefit to us, and to the point that our members have said, when we are able to get back together in person, can we still continue this virtual meeting as well? Because I don't like to drive at 9 o'clock at night when it's dark, and it's easier if I could stay home and still be involved. So some very good benefits there in spite of the situation that we're in. I do want to say thank you to Lincoln County specifically for including us as volunteers in eligibility for the vaccination. As you may be aware, if you've seen any of the 65, 70 folks we have in ACS, like me, they're getting older. And so they're in a higher risk group than many other folks. So asking them to come out and participate and help and volunteer without them being vaccinated was a risk, in my opinion. So we were very cautious with folks and urged them to take care of themselves first. But it was nice to see that the county supported us and our group by allowing us to get the vaccinations, and that allowed us to participate in other areas that we hadn't been participating in before. Jenny mentioned a little bit that we took on some other roles. Traditionally, yes, we've been those strange people over there in the corner with the radio that can talk to lots of other people. Comfortable. I'm very comfortable with that position, but the need arose for some different kind of things, and we were offered the opportunity to participate, some in a technological situation where we could help Jenny's department set up situations for the fire, recapping things, set up the technology there, set up stuff at the points of distribution for the vaccine where we could help with that, PPE distribution. And we took the time to model that a little bit, or massage the participation so we could still use our radios, and then I can call it a communications exercise. It works out very well for us. So we've had to change our role a little bit. I think it's been very positive for our group, and I look forward to doing more of those kind of things. it's a constant update for us technology wise. I don't think any of us are still using the same computer we had 10 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago. So understand some of the wonderful infrastructure that Lincoln County has supported for us is I literally have radio equipment that's 25 plus years old that we have nursed along for quite a while. So we're getting some of that replaced through Jenny working on some very good grant monies for us, as well as some of our relationships with adjacent counties where equipment comes out of public safety that's still very serviceable and is a great upgrade for us and should last a long time, and we get it for next to nothing from another county. So we continue to upgrade things like that in our equipment. Samaritan has been a wonderful helper, providing computers, laptops for us as they surplus them out. They're still very usable for us. So we put a little money into them to replace a couple things, and we've got some very good equipment that way. It's a constant upkeep battle, and we are working on it, but I will say it has been fantastic this year and the last part of last year to be involved in other things for Lincoln County. And I do get around to other counties in Oregon for work, for amateur radio as well, and I like this one the best, and I like to be here. So thank you very much for your support. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to give it a try.
Anything more? Go ahead, Jenny, go ahead.
I was going to ask Casey if he could scroll down to the page where we have their activity hours. I just want to take an opportunity. Should be close to the second to the last page. There we go.
There we go.
So, yep. So just to give you an idea of the number of hours, granted with COVID, they weren't able to give as many hours as they normally would. So this year they did have a total volunteer hours of 101 hours. And when you take that and multiply it by the volunteer value hours, that's quite a bit of money that they give back to Lincoln County. We are holding steady with about 70 volunteers, but I do feel that this coming next year, with Mike Eastwind starting some new amateur radio technician classes, I really foresee that in the next 3 to 5 years, that number go up considerably. And let's see if we scroll down to the next page, please. So this right here to me is one of the most valuable pieces of information I can give you. This gives you a summary of the hours that they have volunteered. And again, that's just for 2020. So the green hours would be their typical ACS volunteer roles, about 711 hours. And then for COVID specifically, their group donated over 129 hours. And the PPE distribution there, about 85 hours, and probably not all of those hours were accounted for in the very beginning when we were moving fast. We have a handful of ACS volunteers that have been delivering the PPE supplies to our public safety and healthcare partners since about the April of last year. We call them up, we schedule them. There's been big orders where sometimes we do 30 and 40 PPE deliveries over about a 24-hour period of time. Sometimes we call them, we text them, and they show up within a couple of hours, pick up the supplies, take them where they need to go. Everything is accounted for. It also does sort of that chain of command or audit, if you will, having multiple people touch the same supplies, that's good security practices. And then for Echo Mountain Fire, obviously working in the call center, I've told my auxiliary communication folks from day one when we started the call center is, yeah, you might want to work on a radio, but I'm going to want you to put on a telephone headset because you're communication. So they've all lovingly transferred their capabilities to be able to do that. And so whenever we need call center folks, they're ready there for that. The erosion mitigation work groups, that's where Darren was able to turn that into a communication exercise when we were up in the field. And then, pardon me, setting up the mark that we did, everyone was very surprised and shocked, and we turned it around, got so many partners there, technology was available. And that was really because the auxiliary communication staff came in, told them we had a mission. They did all these wonderful things. They stayed there with us, made sure everything was working. And even behind the scenes, they were the ones coordinating the catering and the food and the back room for all the volunteers that were there. So they really are multi-purpose folks. And then, of course, helping to set up that medical fragile shelter. And again, not all of those hours are accounted because it was kind of hard to get really solid timesheets at the last minute. But this is just a good indication of how they have supported us and you as county commissioners on behalf of all members in Lincoln County. So thank you for your time. And yes, we'd love to entertain any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Commissioners, questions or comments? Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I know that a lot of effort has gone into building, maintaining, growing our ACS through the years. I know this was a real passion for the late Jim Hawley, our longtime emergency manager, and Director Damaris has certainly picked up that torch and carried on. And you know, this is just one more, to me, shining example of how, I mean, we've got great, passionate, hardworking professionals in the county that have been so key to our response to the Echo Mountain fire and to COVID. But also just one more example of how we could not accomplish everything we as a county accomplish without the services of dedicated volunteers who are so essential in making it happen. So my thanks to you, Darren, and to all the members of the team.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Commissioner Jacobson.
I know you always look at whose microphone turns to me first, so I feel like sometimes it's sort of this race with Commissioner Hall and who can click the button fastest. But
I will
maybe that's
confess, I
my
saw
good
both.
nature, I don't know.
I confess I saw both green microphones, but I happened to be looking at Commissioner Hall's.
It just makes me laugh. Anyways, I don't have any questions. Just a big thank you to everyone's work, and you know, even though you know, Jenny said you did not get as many hours in this year as you had previously, I think 2020 hours kind of count double. That's the way I look at that year. So
I like
thank
that.
you so much. Yeah, they're just double across the book. So thank you so much for all of your work this year, to yourself and all of the members that you work with. Big thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
I would echo those same comments. I think, you know, with COVID, the words to describe the COVID pandemic are hard to find or overused. And I think the same applies to volunteers, the hard work that they do, the contributions that they make, and in many ways, the limited appreciation is, you know, something that we need to do as good a job as we can in saying thank you and recognizing the value. But I do have one question, and I'm going to go back to my early days as a commissioner. And the county did not pay; it was paid for by FEMA, the trip to the training center in Maryland. And when the when the Cascadia event happens, you know, at least in the first few days, there's not going to be a lot of infrastructure of any type, which includes communication. So I know at that time the feeling was, well, the ham operators will be the, you know, the critical link, and it, you know, they have the equipment that can make them functional even when there's a very limited infrastructure. Is that still true? What what
Yes,
innovations,
We've got you, Commissioner.
what
Yes,
innovations have happened or may have happened to improve that situation?
Yes, absolutely. That's in almost 30 years in this hobby, that is where we've always been able to help, is by showing up with our own equipment and being able to set that up and operate it to get communications out of an affected area. So we continue to grow and train with a communication system that allows us to send and receive emails over our radio equipment, even though there's no infrastructure in place for 100 or 200 miles away. We're able to connect with locations outside of the affected area and use that radio equipment to send and receive emails as well as do voice communications. So hopefully we can still crawl out from whatever rubble is around and provide that service.
And then I would add, Commissioner, we have our Cascadia Rising exercise coming up in June of 2022. And so one of those focus objectives for us, the state and the federal, because it will be a national exercise, will focus on amateur radio. And we've put a lot of we got the grant for Homeland Security for our mobile trailer. And then this year we are asking for additional funds to continue outfitting that trailer so that it is not attached to the courthouse. It's a separate thing, so we'll have a place to go to. And then as your eventual goal to build a new emergency operations center down the road, that will be then the hub for that critical county communications when a Cascadia event occurs. So we have lots of long-term goals set in place to help us offset or mitigate that loss of traditional infrastructure.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to, on a personal note, ask, I saw the picture of Michael Dane, and Michael was somebody I first got to know when I came to the county, and frankly, I have a little bit of a soft spot for him because he's blind, and my grandfather was blind. So great picture of Michael. What's his role, or what does he do?
I have got to give a little shout out here to a gentleman that I've known for quite a while as well, and is just an amazing communicator. Excuse me. Michael Dane was interested in starting a weekly session on one of our radio repeaters once the virus started limiting things. And he started every noon, Monday through Friday, having a 1 hour chat time on the repeaters with other hams, other amateur radio operators who wanted to visit and just communicate. And he has built that up to a very large group of folks that some out of the county, some from just transient folks that are in the county for a week or two. They check in and visit for a while and try to enhance their communication skills. And he did that all on his own, just wanted to further that. And he also manages whatever they need for communications in Depot Bay, for the city of Depot Bay, for emergency stuff. So this photo of him is in Depot Bay, operating his ham radio equipment. And I'll tell you, he is top notch. We like this guy.
Yep, great person. All right, thank you. Anything else from my fellow commissioners? All right, if not, great information. And again, my thanks to all and keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next we'll move on to the CAFRA grant submission. And I'll confess, I Googled CAFRA. What a mouthful. County Assessment Funding. I don't, my notes are poor. County Assessment Function Funding Assistance Program. What a mouthful. With that, I believe County Assessor Davidson, you're here to give us a report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hunt. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Joe Davidson, County Assessor. Before I jump into CAFA, I wanted to make one note. One mention while we were on the topic of wildfires. House Bill 2341, which I've been a part of, along with a couple other assessors, which is the wildfire relief bill that we've been working on, just passed the House unanimously recently. And so this is the one that offers additional relief, property tax relief, more expeditiously than under current law. And it does so without application from the property owner. So that would help a pretty significant number of property owners that experience damage in Echo Mountain Fire, as well as statewide, that have not gotten the word that they needed to submit an application. And in addition to that, it would provide potentially a little bit extra relief for those that have experienced damage and got in their application, because it's tied directly to loss and real market value. So we're hopeful that that passes the Senate, and if so, it'll potentially help out some of our fire victims. And it's statutory change, so it'll help with future, in the unfortunate event that there's a future event and it's a governor declared emergency, then we can move forward with the same sort of adjustments to property taxes without need of an application. So hopeful on that. Just wanted to give you an update, and I'll continue to update you if I hear anything else.
I know Representative Gomberg has been a strong spokesperson for that legislation.
Right. Yep. I've been working with Gomberg and Representative March down in Jackson County. They've been strong advocates of this bill. So it's good to see it kind of fly through with such support. So on to CAPA, yeah, you pronounced it correct, County Assessment Function Funding Assistance. This is our annual application for this grant. It's a grant that's been in place since late 1980s. It was actually originally set up to kind of following a period when counties were struggling. There was an economic downturn, and a lot of the counties were struggling to just meet some of the basic statutory functions in assessment and tax. Like this, back then they were on a 6-year reappraisal cycle. They had to reappraise every property every 6 years in the county. And so they were failing to meet those basic obligations. They were failing to maintain accurate real market values in some counties. So this concept was brought up as sort of a supplemental support to county general fund for assessment and tax related functions. So the way the program works is that at the time when it was set up, fees for recording documents in the clerk's office, as well as interest on delinquent property taxes, were increased. And that increased amount was funneled into a local county assessment tax fund, accrued interest, and then regularly deposited into a statewide fund along with all the other county deposits. Continued to accrue interest, and then the state Department of Revenue actually withdraws 10% right off the top for their own appraisal functions, as they're responsible for some of the appraising some of the higher value industrial properties in the state, as well as centrally assessed utility properties, things like that. So they take 10%, and then the remaining amount in the fund is distributed back to the counties based on the expenditures filed by each county for assessment and tax functions. And so it's proportionate based on one county's expenditures versus the other. It comes back in a proportionate amount. So it's not always the same. The way it's set up, you know, some counties like ours who have a lot of real estate transactions versus staffing, we contribute a lot more than we get back. And I'll get into a little more of the numbers later, but that's the basic idea of how the program works. And so looks like we have the summary page up here of the staffing. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just a summary. This is from the actual application, summary of our staffing for these functions. And as you can see, this carries beyond just the assessors and tax collector's office. It goes into Board of Property Tax Appeals, which is administered by the county clerk's office. There's a portion of staff there that qualifies under A&T, as well as, we scroll down a little bit more, let's see here, as well as GIS, which is out of our surveyor's office, and our IT, there's IT regular support that we get from that department as well for our computer support. And so really there's several departments at play here. And I just wanted to hit on a couple of the main changes from last year to this year that are reflected in this staffing summary. So last year going into the fiscal year, we had a couple, as you know, there was a policy for freezing vacancies. And so at that time, we just, due to that kind of cut, we phased out 2 of our FTE to account for that. We also were expecting retirement over the last fiscal year. And so really up to this date, we've maintained 2 vacancies, but we do expect or hope to have those re-implemented in this next fiscal year. Come July 1st, those 2 vacancies will have been frozen for 6 months. And so we do have those budgeted in, proposed for this next fiscal year. Besides those 2, and just to be specific, one's a clerical assessment specialist, and then one is an actual property appraiser. Besides those 2, our tax collector made one small adjustment to FTE for closure and garnishment administration. Basically, it's not the addition of additional staff. It's just kind of a reallocation of the treasurer and tax collector side for that function. So that's the basic summary there. And if we scroll down to the next page, this is the actual, go ahead and tilt your head 90 degrees counterclockwise.
Casey, can you rotate that?
I'll give it a shot.
Sorry about that.
There we go. Good job.
So yeah, this is kind of the expenses relating to both staffing, materials, and services. Really, the main change, as I already mentioned, is the addition of or re-implementation of those 2 FTE for assessment evaluation. We do have these same 2 pages in the next section for your comparison. But those are the 2 main changes. We are still waiting on indirect expenses. That's just a percentage, that 13.93%. That's a percentage that we get from our finance department each year, and that's just a rollover from last year. We're still waiting on an update there. And then capital outlay, we have claimed that in the past for our software conversion, but since we've already claimed all that, we can't claim it again. So there is still some pending expenses out there for our software, but we've already claimed that. So that's zeroed out. So really that's the summary there. And if you go down, the next section is, like I said, it's the same 2 pages, and it's strictly just for comparison purposes, if you like. And if you go past those, we have some historic summary pages of this program. And here in Lincoln County. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So these probably look familiar to you. It's basically, it shows our total expenditures for assessment and tax compared to the amount we're getting back from this grant. And as you can see, it just continues to go down each year. This is a pretty, overall, looking at recording fees and delinquent tax interest, it's kind of a stagnant source of funding. They're kind of opposing funding sources. So as you can see, if you even look back 10 years, the overall amount we're getting back is fairly unchanged overall. Whereas you can see personnel expenses especially have just continue to rise. And so unless there's some sort of supplemental funding, I know there's been talk about that in recent years, because this is obviously an issue with the decline here. This will probably continue to go down because that funding source isn't really increasing at all. There was a little bit of a spike. We get a annual forecast from the Department of Revenue each year, and there was a pretty significant spike in refinance activity, which also increased the document recordings this year. And so we might see a little bit more than expected over probably quarters 3 and 4 of this fiscal year. But delinquent interest, that continues to go down. So that's kind of the history there. And if you look back, really, it's always interesting to see what this did cover at one point in time. You go down to 2001, 2, it's on the next page. And you see there's about 8 years there with an asterisk next to them. Those were years when the state was actually contributing some additional funding. I think they're kicking in an additional $1 million into the CAFA fund. So there was a little bit of a spike in funding there compared to our expenditures, but that was phased out in 2009. And so really ever since then, it's just been in decline when you look at funding compared to our expenses. The next page is kind of similar to the first page, but a real summary of our expenditures per department. And it kind of gives a history all the way back to 2000. And it shows a representation of what department represents the total expenses there. So any questions so far? This is pretty typical of this application. And then the last
Claire, your
page.
microphone. Commissioner Hall's microphone just turned green.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Joe. Actually, it's a historical question I'd like to direct to our resident historian and county council Wayne Belmont. Do I recall correctly that when this legislation was originally passed, even though maybe it wasn't written into the legislation itself, it seems to me that I recall a clearly stated legislative intent that this program would pick up 50% of the costs of the local assessment and taxation function. Is that correct, or am I just imagining that?
No, that is correct. We were looking at trying to cover half the costs through this particular program, which I'm not sure, maybe a single year or two, that we went through pretty quickly, that we were close to getting half, but most
Like
years
around
were significantly-
44%.
Yeah, most years are significantly below what had been the intent of the original legislation, yes.
Okay,
And
thank
if I
you.
remember correctly, that was a point that my friend and former Commissioner Lindley used to make consistently year after year. So never quite made it. And it's as Joe pointed out, the percentage is declining, and that is a concern, obviously. So, Commissioner Jacobson, thoughts or comments?
No additional comments for me. Thanks, Joe, for presenting.
Sure, and this last page here, I didn't really get to cover that, but this is also an interesting one that shows basically what's going out versus what's coming in. This is supplied to us by our tax collector, who sees those numbers, and obviously this most recent year is only a half the year. And like I said, there was a spike in recordings for a lot of the refinance activity this year. So we might see that a little bit more than right now. It's indicating, maybe 500,000. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit more than that based on that recent activity, but that's yet to be seen because there's so many variables at play. It's not only what's going on in our county, but what's happening in other counties. What are other counties filing for their own expenditures versus ours? And so it really has yet to be seen. But like I mentioned, CAFA funding, A&T funding is a really hot topic recently. We have a work group going on about other potential funding sources to help supplement this fund. There was a bill, I think in 2019, there was a pretty strong try at additional funding. However, that was overshadowed by the corporate excise tax. So we'll just have to see what happens, but it is a hot topic as this is recognized as an issue. So.
All right, well, let us know how we might be able to help in support of that effort.
Okay.
Certainly it's critical to the county and frankly the people that we try to help. So anything else, Commissioner?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
Just one more thing, so that, the other obvious thing is this is a little bit premature in our budget cycle, which is kind of the whole part of this program, is that we need to submit this by May 1st prior to any kind of budget resolution. And so I'm presenting this now. It needs to hopefully be resolved by next week's meeting so that we can get it into the Department of Revenue by May 1st.
Well, I guess I'll defer to Council Belmont. Do we need to take formal action now? I'm not sure much is going to change from a budget standpoint between now and next week.
It's not, and this has been this is the third leg of the complaints we've had about the program, unfortunately. One is it didn't cover 50%. Two is that we're sending out a lot more money than we're receiving back. And the third is that they do it in a cycle that does not fit with anybody's budget cycle. So you're committing that portion of the budget before it actually has gone through the process and been approved by the budget committee and adopted by the board. But we've done this for 20 years or more, whatever the time frame is here. So we're going to have to approve that before May 1st, and we've done it before.
Well, in that case, there's, unless I'm missing something, there's no reason that we couldn't approve this report as submitted today.
Mr. Chair, just given our usual procedure and we're looking at a May 1st deadline, I mean, I know essentially nothing's going to change, but I'd be more comfortable if we put it as a decision action item next week.
Yeah, I was looking at the calendar and counting days wrong, so I support that. So we'll look forward this to come back to us next week. All right, Commissioner Jacobson, anything, or we'll move on to our next agenda item. Thank you, Joe.
Nothing from me.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item on our agenda is STR update, Council Belmont.
Commissioners, thank you. Wayne, Belmont County Council, and this is going to be a very short update. This is not going to contain any additional policy discussions today, but rather some process discussions of what we've done and where we're going. And so we have completed at this point the workshops that we had put together to discuss the recommendations for changes to our short-term rental licensing program. And just to give you some statistics of the participation in the first workshop, which was held in late January of 2020, we had 177 participants that actually came in on the Zoom meeting, and more than 50 of them actually presented in a 3-hour meeting, presented us with testimony that is incorporated into the record. Casey's pulling up the webpage that includes that. The second meeting, which we held on April 7th, which included the specific recommendations that we made to you for changes, had 98 participants. I know there was as much interest, I think, in the second workshop as the first, maybe more, but we actually were able to tell people that they could, if they did not want to speak, that they could submit information or testimony to us through the Smart Sheet connection to the Board of Commissioners, and that we have been tabulating that, as Casey is showing right now, from the beginning of this process of looking at program changes. And so many people were watching that on our YouTube live channel. And for those who may be interested in hearing what people had to say from either of those workshops, both of those are contained, links to those particular video presentations are in the website there. You can check on those links and actually listen to what folks had to say. And in the April 7th meeting, we had, again, over 50 people who participated and provided us with testimony. And that was, again, about a 3-hour session that occurred. So I would commend to anybody who wants to learn more about what folks had to say to listen to those two workshops. Since April, the April 7th meeting, really starting with April 5th when we announced that we were holding the workshop, through today, April 19th, you have also received 95 additional public comments with hundreds of pages of materials that folks have submitted related to this particular activity. At your request, I know, and the commissioners were asking that people try to respond to the specific recommendations that have been made in 4 key areas. And I will say this, while there are still people who are talking in general about support or opposition to STRs in a general sense, a lot of people did provide feedback directly to the 4 recommendations. And so I want to express my thanks to folks for focusing in on those particular areas. And that's a lot of information that we're gathering and we're processing at this point. So we're continuing to process all that information and all that input. I can tell you that based on what we had heard and what we've seen so far, we want to do some revisions to the recommendations that we've made, not changing the subject matter necessarily, but tweaking the actual way we'll implement those, the recommendations we make to you, how we would implement those in changes to the county code. So we have some more staff work that we need to do. And we'll be coming back to you. We're looking right now at coming back to you on May 3rd with the next set of revised recommendations. So with that, I'm going to stop there. That was the extent of what I wanted to provide to you today. And then take any questions you might have, and we'll be back to you on May 3rd.
Commissioner Hall, your microphone's green.
Oh, I don't think I turned it off last time. So Just one question, Mr. Belmont. So I assume the initial presentation on May 3rd, and then we schedule at least one more session for board deliberation and then action. So this still keeps us on our timeline of wanting to have something in place before the expiration of the current licensing moratorium, which I believe is at the end of the current fiscal year.
Yes, but in all fairness, I think it does. But I think in terms of potential implementation, we may, depending on what you decide, it all obviously depends on what your final decisions are. We may need to extend or release that particular the suspension resolution that was made or order that, you know, towards the end of May. But it depends on what direction you actually take and what you're going to finally adopt.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, Commissioner Hall took my first question, so thanks, Commissioner Hall. I guess the second kind of question comment I had is there were several commenters, I think both some that made public comment, other ones that emailed me directly that really dug into the weeds on enforcement, including how the 3 strikes rule could or should work, including, you know, violation fees and that kind of stuff. Like I said, really getting into the weeds, which is what I think we needed. So I would just, I'm sure you're probably working with Sheriff Flanders already, but I would just like to see, you know, by May 3rd or possibly after that, a really, really detailed document looking at our enforcement policy going forward. I know that is something that we asked staff to come back to, but there were some public comments specifically that really got into that, and I think made some thoughtful comments about the initial structure that you had put out there, Council Belmont.
And I agree with that. And that a lot of that is the particulars of what that process would actually look like. And that's still to come. That's something that's still to be developed here. But we do have that public input, and we will be, you know, looking at all that public input and reporting back to you what we have received.
Anything more, Commissioner? Okay.
That's all for me at this time.
All right. Well, again, I will just say I'm glad to see that we're continuing to meet our deadline. I believe it was June 1st for implementation, or at least a decision on the issues relative to short-term rentals. So I look forward to the continuing discussion and implementation of whatever decisions we as a commission make. So thank you for that update. All right, move on to reports. And Commissioner Jacobson, I'll give you the honors of going first.
I feel like I really gave most of my report in the wildfire recovery end, so nothing else to report beyond that.
All right. Commissioner Hall.
Nothing else to report. Thank you.
All right. I will just, I guess, indicate that I believe we all three received a request from Jeff Doyle about letter of support for funding of the East County Fire Station. Unless I hear objections, I'll ask Christie to prepare a letter, have it reviewed by Council Belmont, and then have our signatures added if that's agreeable.
That has my support.
Yeah, I did already submit support on my own, but I am happy to support a joint letter. And I believe there was another request for the Toledo pool as well that came around that was asking for support.
Okay, well, I'm certainly agreeable to looking at a letter of support for them too. So I'll ask Christie to check out that and circulate a letter ultimately for our signatures.
Colleagues, actually the deadline for the initial request to submit to Congressman Schrader for possible federal funding, you know, we got very short notice on that, I think on a Monday, and we needed it the next day. So I just went ahead and did an individual letter, but now Billy Joe Smith, who's spearheading that effort, just emailed today and requested that the letter be modified slightly for submission to the state legislature. So perhaps if Christie, I already asked her to do a draft, perhaps if she could add the signature spaces for all three of us, and as long as you both sign off on the language, I think it would be great to have all of us on the record in support of that.
Okay, I'm sorry, which initiative is that?
It's funding for the Toledo pool
Cool.
construction.
Okay, very good. All right, if there's nothing more from my fellow commissioners, as far as reports, we'll move to public comment. This is where we review virtually the public comment that we've received since our last Board of Commissioners meeting, which would have been on the 12th. And let's see, I believe that covers the period that is presented visually. And then again, that link that Casey was showing earlier shows the consolidated reports relative to the VRD STR issue. Scroll down, there you go, combined input through the 19th, or at least through 1 o'clock today. All right, if there's nothing more, we will be recessing into an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 parentheses 2 parentheses D to discuss labor negotiations. We will not be coming back into public session, so we will be concluding this meeting in executive session. But I am going to suggest a recess until 5 o'clock before we start the labor negotiations. And not seeing any objections from my fellow commissioners, I will recess this meeting, and we will be entering into executive session again pursuant to ORS 192.660 parentheses 2 parentheses D to discuss labor negotiations. And I missed it, but we will be having a joint work session tonight with the City Council of Depot Bay starting at 5:30 p.m. That will be held virtually. And our next meeting of the Board of Commissioners will be held virtually on Monday, April 26th at 3 p.m. With that, we are in recess.